The Intersolar Combat Academy floated in the neutral zone between three major galactic arms, a station so massive it had its own weather patterns in the biodome sections. Established 2 centuries ago after the Treaty of Unified Defense, the Academy represented something that sounded noble in council chambers, but looked absolutely ridiculous in practice. Mandatory military cooperation between species that, until recently, had been perfectly content trying to annihilate each other. Here's the thing about cosmic peacekeeping institutions. They work great on paper. In reality, you get Krell warriors who communicate through pheromone aggression, sharing barracks with Voxthan hunters who consider anyone under 7 feet tall to be prey-sized. Throw in the Metherian shock troops, beings made of living crystal who genuinely cannot comprehend why flesh-based life forms complain about pain. And you've got yourself a powder keg with a graduation ceremony. The Academy took the top 0.1% of each species' military candidates, the best of the best, the cream of the crop, the most likely to survive first contact with hostiles and not immediately dissolve into their component molecules. And then there was Riley Chen, human, female, 23 standard years, 5 feet and 4 inches of what the Krell called adorable vulnerability, and the Voxthan called inadequate skeletal structure. Her admission scores were technically proficient. Humans had only been granted Galactic Council membership 15 years ago, so the bar was set diplomatically low. She could run a 6-minute mile, which was impressive on Earth. In the Academy, where Krell hatchlings could sprint at 40 miles per hour and Voxthan could leap 40 feet vertically, her scores translated to roughly mobile enough to flee, not fast enough to matter. Her first day at combat assessment had become legendary for all the wrong reasons. The strength test required candidates to lift 3 times their body weight. Riley managed 1.8 times. The Krell instructor, Sergeant Vexmore, had actually stopped the test to recalibrate the equipment, assuming it was broken. It wasn't. Speed trials. She placed dead last, barely finishing before the system auto-timed out. Endurance runs in 2.5G environments. She vomited twice and triggered her medical monitor. Hand-to-hand combat simulations. The Metherian she'd been paired with, a being named Crystalex, who was genuinely trying to be gentle, had accidentally dislocated her shoulder within the first 30 seconds. The Metherian had been mortified. Riley had been given a medical waiver for the next week. By month 2, she was a punchline. The human female will not survive winter trials, Thexazar announced during mess hall dinner, his mandibles clicking with what passed for Krell laughter. He was the Academy's golden student, top of his class in every category, already courted by 3 different military divisions. His exoskeleton bore the dark green striping that indicated warrior caste breeding, and he moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having lost a fight. I give her 4 hours on Vorgan 7, possibly 5 if she finds a good hiding hole. I'll take that bet, said a Voxthan named Slicks, his forked tongue tasting the air. 3 hours, maximum. Humans have no thermal regulation for cold climates. She'll freeze before any predator finds her. You're both being generous, added a Metherian whose name translated roughly to harmonics of shattered granite. 2 hours. Her structural integrity cannot withstand sustained stress. Riley sat 3 tables away, eating her protein ration and pretending not to hear. She'd gotten good at that. The Academy's translation implants meant everyone understood everyone else, which was great for cosmic unity and terrible for avoiding insults in 14 different languages. The thing was, they weren't exactly wrong. By every measurable metric, Riley Chen was the weakest student in her class. Her reflexes were slower. Her physical strength was laughable. Her endurance was a statistical joke. The Academy's AI-generated probability models gave her a 12% chance of passing final examinations. But here's what those probability models didn't account for. Riley Chen had spent her entire life being underestimated. Growing up on Earth's overpopulated eastern seaboard, getting into the Intersolar Academy had required competing against 8 million applicants for one of humanity's 27 allocated slots. She'd been rejected twice. The third time, she'd submitted an application that included a 50-page tactical analysis of the Academy's own training scenarios, complete with identified weaknesses and proposed solutions. They'd accepted her just to see if she was right. She usually was. The Academy's training structure followed a brutal progression. 16 months of specialized instruction across combat, strategy, survival, and xenological studies, culminating in a final examination that had a mortality rate of 0% and a washout rate of 38%. Nobody died. Emergency beacons and medical extraction teams saw to that. But plenty of students learned the hard way that being the best on their home planet meant precisely nothing against a Vorgan 7 Rendclaw. As the months progressed, Riley developed a reputation, not for excellence. That was reserved for students like Thexazar, who could punch through reinforced doors and had reaction times measured in milliseconds. No, Riley's reputation was for stubbornness. She failed the obstacle courses, but kept running them. She lost every sparring match, but studied the recordings for hours. She couldn't match the other species physically, so she memorized their movement patterns, their tells, their weaknesses. The human female studies combat like it is a mathematical equation, Sergeant Vexmore noted in an instructor evaluation. Ineffective in practical application, but theoretically sound. Recommend washout before finals to prevent injury. The Academy administrators had a different take. Humans were new to the galactic stage, and Earth's inclusion in the Council had been controversial. Having a human student fail spectacularly would reinforce every stereotype about humanity being a backwater species that had gotten lucky with fusion technology. Having her quietly wash out before finals? That was acceptable. Embarrassing, but acceptable. Letting her compete in finals when she was statistically doomed? That was a diplomatic nightmare waiting to happen. 3 weeks before the final examination, Riley was called to the Commandant's office. Commandant Jixkor was a Voxthon who'd fought in the Metherian expansion wars and had the scars to prove it. Half his face was reconstructed biosynthetic tissue, and his left arm was entirely mechanical. He'd seen more combat than most of his instructors combined, and he ran the academy with the kind of efficiency that came from watching too many young soldiers die badly. "Cadet Chen," he said, his voice running through the translator with a rasping quality. "Sit." Riley sat. The chair was designed for Voxthon proportions, leaving her feet dangling like a kid in a grown-up's office. "Your performance scores," Jixkor continued, pulling up a holographic display, "are concerning. Bottom 15 percentile in physical assessments, bottom 20 percentile in combat trials. Your theoretical scores are acceptable, but theory doesn't stop a Rendclaw from tearing your arm off." "No, sir," Riley agreed. "But knowing where Rendclaws hunt and what triggers their territorial aggression might help me avoid being in that situation." Jixkor's remaining eyes studied her. "You're aware that you can withdraw from final examinations? No penalty. You'd receive your certification as a Galactic Defense Auxiliary Officer. Respectable career. Safe." "I didn't come here for safe, sir." "No." He tapped the desk with one claw. "You came here to prove something. To whom? Your planet? Your species? Yourself?" Riley considered that. "All of the above? Pride is a poor shield against predators, Cadet." Good thing I'm not planning to use pride then. Jixkor almost smiled. Almost. You understand that I cannot show favoritism. When you are on Vorgan 7, you will have the same equipment, the same time limit, and the same threats as every other student. If you trigger your emergency beacon, you fail. If you fail to reach extraction, you fail. If you die, and you won't, but if circumstances somehow allow it, you fail. Understood, sir? Then you're either brave or stupid. I haven't decided which. He dismissed her with a wave. Try not to die in the first hour. It reflects poorly on the academy. The announcement of final examination parameters came during a general assembly. All 287 remaining candidates, down from the initial 340, gathered in the main auditorium. The holographic display showed Vorgan 7 in all its hostile glory. Vorgan 7 was what the Galactic Council classified as a Class 8 death world. The planet rotated slowly, giving it temperature swings from -40 at night to +60 during the day. The atmosphere was technically breathable, but thin enough to cause altitude sickness. The ecosystem was a nightmare of evolutionary one-upmanship, where everything had evolved to kill everything else, and the things at the top of the food chain were the stuff of cadet nightmares. Wren claws, 12 feet tall, armored hide that could shrug off plasma fire, claws that could shred reinforced steel. Territorial, aggressive, and smart enough to use basic tactics. They hunted in pairs, which was just nature showing off at that point. Your examination begins at dawn, local time. Commandant Jixkor announced. You will be dropped at randomized coordinates within a 50-kilometer radius of the extraction point. You have 72 hours. Reach the extraction point, and you pass. Fail to reach it, and you wash out. Trigger your emergency beacon, and you wash out. The beacon is for life-threatening injuries only. He paused, letting that sink in. You will be provided with standard survival gear. 1 week's rations, basic medical supplies, a single plasma sidearm with 2 charge packs, environmental suit rated for Vorgan 7 conditions, and a navigation beacon showing the extraction point direction. Everything else you acquire or improvise. The auditorium buzzed with excited conversation. For most species, this was the moment they'd been training for. A chance to prove themselves against a real threat. Riley ran calculations in her head. 72 hours, 50 kilometers. That was roughly 17 kilometers a day, accounting for terrain and obstacles. Doable, even for her slower pace. The real problem was the wren claws and whatever other delightful creatures Vorgan 7 had waiting. One final note, Jixkor added. Interference with other candidates is not prohibited. If you choose to eliminate competition, that is your prerogative. We're training military officers, not diplomats. The galaxy is not kind to the weak. Thexazar's mandibles clicked audibly. Riley didn't need to look to know he was staring at her. The betting pools hit fever pitch after the announcement. Galactic credits changed hands as students, instructors, and even some administrators placed wagers on who would wash out first. Riley's odds were spectacularly bad. The smart money said she'd trigger her beacon within the first 12 hours, probably from hypothermia or a broken leg. A few contrarians bet on her making it 18 hours out of sheer stubbornness. Nobody bet on her passing. Riley spent her final 3 weeks in preparation that looked nothing like her classmates. While Thexazar and the other top candidates ran combat drills and practiced their hunting techniques, Riley was in the archives. Vorgan 7 had hosted Academy Finals for 30 years. Every examination was recorded for training purposes. Riley watched all of them. She studied topographical maps, climate patterns, predator behavior, plant life, water sources. She memorized the locations where previous candidates had been eliminated, looking for patterns. Wren claws were territorial. They marked their ranges with claw marks on specific types of trees. They hunted primarily at dusk and dawn, using the temperature shifts to mask their thermal signatures. They avoided certain areas, places with high concentrations of a local plant that apparently irritated their breathing. Other predators had patterns too. Everything had patterns. You cannot defeat a wrenclaw in direct combat. One of her human instructors, Commander Park, told her during their final meeting. He was one of only 3 humans on the Academy staff, a former Special Forces operator who'd earned his position through sheer competence. So, don't try. You win by not fighting, you understand? Don't be there when the monsters show up. Exactly. Every student who washed out tried to prove they could handle the wildlife. The ones who passed treated the wildlife like weather, something to avoid, not engage. What about students eliminating each other? Park's expression darkened. It's rare. Most candidates focus on survival. But there are always a few who see it as an opportunity to thin competition. You'll have a target on your back. Because I'm human? Because you're weak. Predators target the sick and injured. Same principle applies. Riley nodded slowly. Then I need to not look weak. Good luck with that. Drop day came with all the ceremony of an execution and the excitement of a sports tournament. Candidates were loaded into individual drop pods, their gear already secured. The pods were cramped, automated, and designed for a single purpose: getting students planetside without killing them in the process. Riley ran through her mental checklist as her pod sealed. Plasma sidearm, checked. Navigation beacon, active. Emergency beacon, hopefully unnecessary. Environmental suit, fitted and functional. And tucked into her suit's internal pockets, a few items she'd carefully acquired: local plant samples from the archive's biological database, synthesized scent markers, and a few tools that were technically within regulation parameters. The drop was violent. The pod hit Vorgan 7's atmosphere like a rock hitting water, shaking hard enough to rattle her teeth. External cameras showed brief glimpses of other pods scattering across the drop zone, then nothing but clouds and atmospheric entry burn. Impact was softer than expected. The pod's landing system worked as advertised. The hatch blew with a pneumatic hiss, and Riley got her first real look at Vorgan 7. Cold. That was the first impression. Dawn was breaking, but the temperature was still hovering around freezing. The landscape was alien in that specific way that made her hindbrain scream danger. Purple. Vegetation, rock formations that looked almost crystalline. And in the distance, something that might have been trees or might have been massive fungi. Hard to tell. Riley activated her navigation beacon. The extraction point was 43 kilometers northeast. She had 72 hours. She took a breath and started walking. The first 6 hours were about establishing baseline information. Riley moved carefully, watching for signs of predator activity, testing the terrain, identifying which plants were the same species she'd studied in the archives. The environmental suit kept her warm, but she could feel the thin atmosphere making her work harder for each breath. She found a stream around hour 3, fresh water running over rocks that glittered with mineral deposits. Good to know. She wouldn't die of thirst. Around hour 4, she found her first claw marks. They were carved deep into what looked like a purple tree trunk, gouges as wide as her arm. Fresh, too. The exposed wood was still oozing sap. Riley examined the marks, measuring them against her own height. Definitely rend claw. The territorial marker was positioned to be visible from multiple angles, a clear message to anything else in the area. This space is taken. She marked the location on her beacon and altered her route. The first scream came around hour 6. It was distant, maybe 2 kilometers away, but the sound carried across Vorgan 7's thin air, a Metharian's sonic resonance, distorted by what was probably pain. Then silence. Then the telltale shimmer of an emergency beacon activating. 1 down. 286 to go. Night fell fast on Vorgan 7. Riley found a defensible position, a rocky outcropping that gave her a view of the approaches and some overhead protection, and settled in. She didn't risk a fire. Heat signature would draw attention. Instead, she activated her suit's thermal layer and ate her ration cold. In the darkness, she could hear them. Distant sounds of predators moving, hunting, establishing their own territories. Closer sounds of other candidates trying to stay hidden. A plasma weapon discharged somewhere to the east. Someone deciding to make a statement or panicking its shadows. Riley checked her navigation beacon. 38 kilometers to go. She was making decent time. She allowed herself 4 hours of sleep, setting her suit's alarm to wake her before dawn. When she woke, frost had formed on her suit's exterior. Another day in paradise. Day 2 was when she started seeing evidence of other candidates. A discarded supply pack here, dropped in a hasty retreat. Plasma scoring on rocks there, indicating a fight or a miss. Boot prints in soft soil, leading away from something. And at one point, she found another emergency beacon site. The area was churned up, vegetation trampled, and there was purple blood. Definitely not human or any species she recognized, mixed with something darker. A candidate had stood their ground against local wildlife. The wildlife had won. The candidate had lived, but their examination was over. Riley salvaged what she could, half a charge pack, some rations, and a replacement water filter. Not exactly a treasure trove, but in survival situations, everything mattered. She was making good time, roughly 20 kilometers covered, when she noticed she was being followed. The signs were subtle. Broken vegetation that wasn't from her passage. Disturbed ground at a junction she'd crossed 10 minutes earlier. And once, just once, she caught a reflection of something metallic in the tree line. Not a predator. A candidate. Riley didn't react, obviously. She kept walking, maintaining her pace, but her mind was racing. Who would bother tracking her? She wasn't a threat, unless that was precisely why. Someone wanted an easy elimination to boost their confidence, or someone wanted to make a statement. She had a pretty good idea who. Riley altered her route slightly, heading toward an area she'd marked on her map. According to the archive data, this region had the highest concentration of rendclaw activity. Also the highest concentration of a plant species called Vorgan thorn, the one that irritated rendclaw breathing. If someone wanted to hunt her, she'd lead them somewhere interesting. By midday, she was certain Thexazar was tracking her. She'd caught glimpses of green-striped exoskeleton, seen boot prints too large to be anything but Krell. He was being obvious about it, probably wanting her to know she was being hunted. Standard intimidation tactics. Make the prey panic. Panicked prey made mistakes. Riley didn't panic. She planned. The Vorgan thorn grew in dense patches around rocky areas, probably something to do with soil acidity. Riley led her pursuit directly into the thickest concentration she could find, then used her synthesized scent markers, carefully prepared before the examination, to mark a trail deeper into the patch. Then she doubled back and climbed. The rock formations in this area were tall enough to provide a vantage point. Riley found a ledge about 20 feet up, tucked herself into a crevice, and waited. Thexazar appeared 30 minutes later, following her trail with the confidence of an apex predator. His plasma rifle was out, and he was scanning carefully. Smart enough to be cautious, arrogant enough to assume he had the advantage. He followed her trail into the Vorgan thorn patch and stopped. Riley watched as he examined the ground, his mandibles twitching in what she'd learned was Krell confusion. The trail ended here. No boot prints leading out. No sign of her climbing. He thought she was hiding in the thorn bushes. What Thexazar didn't know, because he'd been too busy practicing his combat skills to study the ecology, was that Vorgan thorn patches were neutral zones. The plants irritated rendclaws, yes. They also attracted something else. Boreworms. 6-foot-long tunneling creatures that lived in colonies beneath the thorn patches, emerging at the sound of footsteps to investigate potential threats or food. The ground beneath Thexazar's feet erupted. 5 boreworms, each the diameter of Riley's torso, burst from the soil with all the subtlety of a mining explosion. Thexazar reacted with trained reflexes, plasma rifle firing, but boreworms had armored hides too. The shots glanced off. He ran. Fast. Even by Krell standards, Thexazar could move when motivated. The boreworms pursued for about 50 meters, then gave up and returned to their patch. They weren't really aggressive, just territorial. Riley waited another hour, making sure Thexazar was truly gone, then climbed down and continued northeast. She didn't see him again that day. Night 2 was colder. Riley found shelter in a cave system, carefully checked for occupants first, and allowed herself another 4 hours of sleep. Her body was exhausted, her legs aching from the constant movement. But her mind was clear. 23 kilometers to extraction. 1 more day. She could do this. Dawn of day 3 brought a new problem. The temperature had dropped significantly. Some kind of weather pattern rolling through. Her suit's thermal layer was working overtime, draining power faster than anticipated. She'd need to reach extraction by evening or risk hypothermia. Riley pushed her pace, moving as quickly as her human endurance allowed. The terrain was getting rougher, more vertical, as she approached the mountain range where the extraction point was located. And that's when she found the body. Not a real body. Emergency beacon activation had saved the candidate's life. But the elimination site told a story. A Voxthon student, judging by the equipment, massive claw marks on the surrounding rocks, plasma scoring everywhere. And in the center, a massive pool of dark blood, rendclaw blood. Someone had fought a rendclaw and lost, but they'd wounded it badly. Riley stood very still, processing that information. A wounded rendclaw was more dangerous than a healthy one. Wounded predators were unpredictable, aggressive, often abandoning their normal behavior patterns. And if the blood trail was any indication, the creature had retreated in the same direction she was heading, toward the extraction point. She could detour, add hours to her journey, maybe miss the extraction window entirely. Or she could continue forward and risk encountering an angry, wounded apex predator. Riley checked her plasma sidearm. 1.5 charge packs. Not enough to take down a healthy rendclaw. Definitely not enough for a wounded, angry one. She kept walking forward. The blood trail was easy to follow. Too easy. The rendclaw was either severely wounded or had stopped caring about being tracked. Neither option was comforting. Riley moved more carefully now, watching for signs of ambush. Rendclaws were smart enough for basic tactics. Wounded or not, this thing was still the apex predator of Vorgan 7. She found it around hour 10 of day 3. The rendclaw had holed up in a rocky clearing, probably attempting to rest and heal. It was massive. 12 feet of armored nightmare, with claws the size of machetes. The Voxthon's plasma fire had burned through armor on its left flank, exposing damaged tissue. The wound was severe enough that the creature's movements were labored. But it was still very much alive. And it saw her. Riley froze. Her training screamed at her to run, but running triggered chase instincts. Instead, she slowly raised her hands, showing she wasn't an immediate threat. The Wrenclaw watched her with eyes that held disturbing intelligence. Then it roared. The sound was primal, a challenge and a warning. Riley felt it in her bones. This was the apex predator of Vorgan 7 telling her that this was its territory and she needed to leave or die. Riley very slowly started backing away. The Wrenclaw took a step forward. Bad sign. She had seconds to make a decision. Fight. Lose immediately. Run. Trigger chase. Or option 3, the one that was absolutely insane but might work. Riley dropped her pack. The Wrenclaw paused, confused. She dropped her plasma sidearm. Now the creature was definitely confused. Prey didn't disarm themselves. Riley slowly opened her pack, moving carefully, and pulled out the emergency medical kit. The Wrenclaw watched, still tense but not attacking. She'd studied Wrenclaw behavior for weeks. They were territorial, yes. Aggressive, absolutely. But they were also intelligent enough to understand non-threatening behavior. And there was one behavior pattern noted in the archives that nobody had successfully tested. Wrenclaws understood submission. Riley took the medical kit, which contained broad-spectrum antibiotics and wound sealant designed to work on multiple biological types, and very carefully tossed it toward the Wrenclaw. It landed about 10 feet from the creature. The Wrenclaw looked at the kit, looked at Riley, looked back at the kit. Riley backed away further, hands still raised, making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. The Wrenclaw approached the medical kit, sniffed it, and then, with surprising delicacy, picked it up with one claw. It looked at Riley one more time, and then it turned and disappeared into the rocks, carrying the medical kit with it. Riley stood there for a solid minute, adrenaline crashing through her system, trying to process what had just happened. She just negotiated with an apex predator, and it worked. She retrieved her plasma sidearm, not her pack, that was a loss she could afford, and continued toward the extraction point. 13 kilometers to go. The final stretch was almost anticlimactic. Riley pushed through exhaustion, cold, and every muscle in her body screaming for rest. She passed 2 more elimination sites, evidence of candidates who'd gotten this close, but not close enough. The extraction point was marked by a beacon visible from 5 kilometers away. As Riley approached, she could see other candidates, already there. Maybe 20 of them, various species, all looking exhausted and triumphant. They stared as she walked into the clearing. A human, the weakest candidate in the class, dead last in every physical metric. And she'd made it. Thexazar was there too, his exoskeleton scratched and dented. His mandibles clicked in what might have been grudging respect or might have been annoyance. Riley found a spot away from the others, sat down, and waited for the extraction shuttle. She'd done it. The Academy's reaction was complicated. On one hand, Riley had passed. Technically, she'd met all requirements. She'd survived 72 hours, reached extraction, and hadn't triggered her emergency beacon. On the other hand, she'd passed by avoiding confrontation entirely, which some instructors argued wasn't in the spirit of the examination. The debate was resolved when Commandant Jixkor pulled up her tracking data and played it for the senior staff. "Cadet Chen," he announced during the final review, completed the examination without firing her weapon once. She avoided or evaded 18 separate predator encounters, including one Wrenclaw interaction that I'm told is unprecedented. He pulled up the footage from her suit camera. The entire encounter played out on screen. Riley disarming herself, offering the medical kit, the Rendclaw accepting and leaving. She also, Zixcor continued with what might have been amusement, led Cadet Thexazar into a boreworm nest, effectively eliminating him as a threat without direct confrontation. Thexazar's mandibles clicked in protest from the candidate assembly. Cadet Chen's approach represents a fundamental understanding of military strategy that many candidates lack. She assessed her weaknesses, compensated with superior preparation and tactical planning, and achieved her objective with minimal resource expenditure. Zixcor's remaining eye fixed on Riley. This is, by definition, excellence. The graduation ceremony was held in the Academy's main auditorium. Of the 287 candidates who'd entered final examination, 184 had passed. Riley Chen stood with them, wearing the same uniform, having earned the same rank. The betting pools had been spectacularly upset. A few instructors who'd bet on her as a long shot had made a fortune. More importantly, every major military division wanted to talk to her about strategic planning positions. Humans, it turned out, had a talent for asymmetric warfare that the galaxy was just beginning to appreciate. Thexazar approached her after the ceremony, his posture stiff but not hostile. "You humiliated me," he said through the translator. "You hunted me," Riley replied. "I defended myself. By running away. By winning." She met his multifaceted gaze. "You're stronger than me. Faster. Better in every physical metric. But I still passed, and you almost didn't. Maybe think about what that means." His mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Then, surprisingly, he extended a claw in what she'd learned was a Krell gesture of acknowledgement. "Perhaps humans are more formidable than we assumed." "Oh, definitely. We're just formidable in really annoying ways." 3 months later, Riley was assigned to the Galactic Defense Fleet's Strategic Operations Division. Her first assignment was analyzing defense patterns for frontier colonies. Her second assignment was teaching a course at the Academy on asymmetric combat tactics. Enrollment was at record highs. Humans, the galaxy was learning, didn't win by being the strongest. They won by making everyone else fight each other while they carefully, methodically achieved their objectives. They won by being so stubbornly persistent that giving up never entered the equation. They won by being underestimated right up until it was too late. The weakest species in known space, statistically speaking. Also the most dangerous, once you bothered to pay attention. And Riley Chen, who'd been told she would wash out in the first 6 hours, had just proven why humanity deserved its place among the stars. Not despite their weaknesses, but because they'd learned to turn weakness into the most devastating weapon of all. The galaxy would never make that mistake again. Though to be fair, humans were absolutely going to let everyone keep underestimating them for as long as possible. Why ruin a good tactical advantage?